Marcus Thompson was trying to make his daughter Emma's 7th birthday dinner special at the modest family restaurant on 5th Street, despite having exactly $23 left until payday, carefully budgeting for 2 meals and 1 small dessert to share, when he noticed the black woman in the worn business suit sitting alone at the corner table. Her menu unopened and her eyes fixed on the plates being delivered to other customers with an expression of such profound hunger that it transcended mere appetite and spoke to something deeper, something about need and dignity and the quiet desperation of trying to maintain composure when your world was falling apart. And Marcus recognized that look because he'd worn it himself 2 years ago, after his wife left, after he'd lost his management job, after he'd spent 3 months sleeping in his car with Emma while working double shifts at a warehouse, just to save enough for a security deposit on their current tiny apartment. And he was about to look away, to focus on his daughter, who was chattering excitedly about her birthday wishes, when Emma tugged his sleeve and whispered with the blunt observation that only children possess, "Daddy, why is that lady looking at our food like she's really hungry? Did she forget to order? Should we ask if she's okay?" Marcus felt his heart clench because Emma, despite being only 7, had inherited his wife's empathy and his own stubborn belief that people should help each other, especially when help was desperately needed. But he also felt the weight of their limited budget, the knowledge that if he invited this stranger to share their meal, Emma might not get her birthday dessert, might not get the small celebration he'd promised. And he wrestled with the decision, practical necessity versus moral obligation, until he looked at the woman again and saw her stand up with quiet dignity, straightening her suit jacket and preparing to leave without ordering. Clearly someone who'd come in hoping she could afford something but had realized even the cheapest menu item was beyond her current means. And Marcus made a choice that his practical mind said was foolish, but his heart knew was right. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Marcus called out, standing from his table, and the woman froze, a flash of shame crossing her face, as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. And Marcus felt a surge of protective instinct, because he recognized that shame, had felt it himself when accepting food assistance, when using food stamps at the grocery store, when admitting to his daughter that they couldn't afford the toys she wanted. And he wanted this woman to know that there was no shame in need, only in ignoring others' need when you could help. "My daughter Emma and I are celebrating her birthday, and we'd be honored if you'd join us. We always order too much food anyway, and Emma loves meeting new people, don't you, sweetheart?" Emma, catching on to what her father was doing with the social intelligence of children, who'd learned to read adult emotions for survival, nodded enthusiastically and added, "It's my birthday, and I get to pick who comes to my party. And I pick you. Please sit with us." The woman's eyes filled with tears that she blinked back rapidly. Her voice when she spoke was carefully controlled, carrying the cadence of someone who'd been educated and professional but had somehow fallen on hard times. "That's very kind, but I don't want to impose on your daughter's special day. I just came in to—" She trailed off, unable to finish the lie, and Marcus said gently, "Please, I insist. And honestly, you'd be doing us a favor. Emma's been wanting to practice her conversation skills. She's quite the talker, and I could use some adult conversation that doesn't involve cartoon characters." He smiled warmly, trying to make it feel less like charity and more like genuine invitation. And after a moment of visible internal struggle, the woman nodded and approached their table, and Marcus saw Emma's face light up with the pure joy of a child who'd just been given permission to be kind. "I'm Marcus, and this is Emma," he said, shaking the woman's hand, and she replied quietly, "My name is Dr. Sylvia Patterson, and I'm grateful for your kindness, more than you can know." Marcus noticed the doctor title and saw the subtle indicators of a formerly successful life, the quality of her suit despite its worn condition, the expensive watch that she'd probably kept because it was a gift, the way she carried herself with professional bearing even in obvious distress, and He wondered what series of events had brought her to this restaurant, unable to afford a meal. They ordered, Marcus stretching his budget to include enough food for 3, quietly grateful that the restaurant had a special that day. And as they waited, Emma asked, with the directness of childhood, "Dr. Patterson, what kind of doctor are you? Do you help sick people get better? My daddy says doctors are really important." Sylvia's expression softened. "I'm a doctor of education, Emma, which means I used to help schools and teachers find better ways to help children learn. I worked with students who had trouble reading or needed extra support, trying to make sure every child got the education they deserved." Her use of past tense wasn't lost on Marcus, and he asked gently, "You're not working in that field anymore?" Sylvia's hands tightened on the table's edge. "I lost my position 6 months ago. Budget cuts. They eliminated the entire educational support department, and I've been applying everywhere, sending out resumes, going to interviews. But there are 50 qualified candidates for every opening, and at 53, I'm competing with people half my age who'll accept half the salary, and my savings ran out 2 months ago, and today I haven't eaten in." She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she was revealing too much to strangers, and Marcus saw the exact moment her professional composure cracked to reveal the exhausted, frightened woman beneath. Emma, with the emotional wisdom that came from having experienced her own family's struggles, reached across the table and patted Sylvia's hand. "It's okay to be sad. My daddy says it's actually brave to admit when things are hard, because then people can help, and helping makes everyone feel better. Like when my daddy helps me with homework, or when I help him by being quiet when he's worried about bills." Marcus felt his throat tighten because he'd tried so hard to shield Emma from their financial stress. But children noticed everything, absorbed their parents' anxiety like sponges, and hearing her articulate his own struggles reminded him that they were in this together, that Emma had been fighting alongside him all this time. The food arrived, and Marcus watched as Sylvia tried to eat slowly, with dignity. But her hunger betrayed her in small ways, the way she had to force herself not to eat too quickly, the way her eyes closed briefly when tasting the first bites, as if savoring not just food, but the relief from hunger's constant ache, the way her hands trembled slightly as she tried to maintain composure, and Marcus felt anger on her behalf. Anger that a woman with a doctorate degree, who'd dedicated her career to helping children, should be reduced to this, should be hungry in a country of such abundance, should have to accept charity from strangers just to eat. "Dr. Patterson," Marcus said carefully, "I know we just met, but I wonder if I could ask you something. Would you be willing to help Emma with her reading? She's struggling a bit with comprehension, and I've been trying to help, but I'm not trained in education. And honestly, I work such long hours at the warehouse that I'm usually too exhausted to be effective. I can't pay much, but I could offer $20 an hour, which I know isn't what someone with your qualifications deserves, but it's what I can afford. And it would really help Emma." He was making up the tutoring offer on the spot, inventing both the need and the budget, because he recognized that Sylvia needed income and purpose but would never accept money as straightforward charity, needed to maintain her dignity by earning rather than receiving, and tutoring was something he could legitimately benefit from, even if Emma's reading struggles were minor. Sylvia looked at him with eyes that saw through the gentle deception, but appreciated it nonetheless. "Marcus, you don't have to create work for me out of pity. I appreciate what you're doing, this meal, this kindness, but I can't accept charity beyond what you've already given." Marcus shook his head firmly. "It's not charity, Dr. Patterson. It's employment, and I'm being selfish here, because Emma actually does need help, maybe not desperately, but every child benefits from personalized educational support, and I've been worried about affording a proper tutor, so you'd actually be saving me money compared to the tutoring centers that charge $40 or $50 an hour. This is a legitimate job offer if you're interested." He held her gaze, willing her to accept, to take this lifeline he was offering, and after a long moment, Sylvia nodded slowly. Then yes, I accept. When would you like to start? Emma bounced in her seat with excitement. Can we start tomorrow? I really do have questions about my reading homework, and having a real doctor teacher would be so cool. And just like that, an arrangement was born from a birthday dinner and an act of kindness. From one struggling person recognizing another and choosing to help despite their own limitations. Over the following weeks, Sylvia came to their small apartment 3 times a week, working with Emma on reading and comprehension. And Marcus saw his daughter blossom under professional attention, saw her confidence grow as Sylvia identified and addressed specific learning gaps. But more than that, he saw Sylvia transforming too, saw purpose returning to her eyes, saw her professional identity being restored through the simple act of doing the work she loved. And he realized that sometimes helping others wasn't about grand gestures but about creating space for people to help themselves, about offering opportunities to contribute rather than just receive. But the tutoring sessions revealed something unexpected. Sylvia was essentially homeless, though she'd been careful to hide it. Marcus discovered this when he insisted on picking her up for a session, and she'd given him an address that turned out to be a 24-hour diner where she'd been spending nights buying a single coffee and sitting in a booth until dawn. And when confronted gently, she'd admitted with profound shame that she'd lost her apartment 2 months ago, had been cycling between the diner, the library, and occasionally sleeping in her car when she could afford gas. And she'd been using the public library's bathrooms to maintain her appearance, washing up in sinks and changing in stalls, desperately trying to look professional for job interviews while living a reality of complete precariousness. Marcus made a decision that night that changed everything. He offered Sylvia the small spare room in their apartment, barely more than a closet with a window, explaining that the previous tenant had left a fold-out cot, and that he'd been thinking about renting it for extra income anyway, and he'd rather rent to someone he knew and trusted, someone who was good for Emma to be around. And he quoted a rent that was absurdly low, barely covering utilities, making it clear without saying so that this was another form of help disguised as mutual benefit. Sylvia's pride warred with her desperation, and Marcus watched her wrestle with the decision, knowing she understood this was charity, but also knowing she was exhausted from sleeping in diner booths, from the constant stress of having no safe place, from trying to maintain professional appearance while living in her car. And finally, with tears streaming down her face, she accepted. I'll pay you back, she promised, when I get a real job, when I'm stable again. I'll pay back every kindness you've shown me. Marcus shook his head. You're already paying me back by helping Emma, by being a positive presence in her life, by reminding both of us that setbacks don't define worth, that struggling doesn't mean failing. You're teaching my daughter lessons about resilience and dignity that I could never teach her myself. So really, we're even. Having Sylvia in the apartment transformed their small family unit in unexpected ways. She brought intellectual conversation and educational structure that Emma thrived under. She helped with cooking and household tasks, not out of obligation, but from genuine desire to contribute. And she became a confidant for Marcus, someone who understood adult struggles and could offer perspective without judgment. And Marcus found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about the pain of his wife leaving, about the shame he'd felt losing his management job, about the fear that he wasn't good enough for Emma, that his daughter deserved better than a father who was barely keeping them above water. And Sylvia listened and understood, and shared her own failures and fears, and they built a friendship based on mutual respect and shared experience of hardship. 3 months into this arrangement, Sylvia got a call about a job interview, a position at the State Department of Education developing curriculum for underserved schools, exactly the kind of work she'd done before, and Marcus helped her prepare, lending her money to get her suit properly cleaned, watching Emma so Sylvia could focus on preparation, coaching her through practice interviews, and when she left for the interview, Both Marcus and Emma waited anxiously for news. She came back 6 hours later, with an expression Marcus couldn't read, and for a terrible moment he thought she'd been rejected, but then she broke into a smile that transformed her entire face. "I got it. They offered me the position, starting salary of $75,000, full benefits. It's everything I hoped for, and more. They were impressed by my experience and my ideas for reaching struggling students, and I start in 2 weeks." Emma squealed and hugged Sylvia, and Marcus felt overwhelming joy for her. Genuine happiness that she'd found her way back to stability, but also a surprising sadness because he'd grown accustomed to her presence, had come to rely on her partnership in parenting and household management, had started thinking of her as family, and he realized with uncomfortable clarity that his feelings for Sylvia had evolved beyond friendship into something deeper. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel since his wife left. The next 2 weeks were filled with Sylvia's preparations and Marcus's internal struggle with emotions he didn't know how to express, afraid that voicing his feelings would seem like manipulation, like he was trying to claim some ownership over her success or extract payment for his help. But Emma, with the emotional perception of children, asked him one night, "Daddy, are you sad that Dr. Sylvia is getting her own place? I'm happy for her, but I'm also going to miss her. Is that okay? Can you be happy and sad at the same time?" Marcus pulled his daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart, you can absolutely be both. I'm incredibly happy that Dr. Sylvia got her dream job and will be able to take care of herself again, but I'm also sad because we'll miss having her here. She's become part of our family, and it's going to be different without her. But different doesn't always mean bad. It just means change. And sometimes change is good, even when it's hard." Emma was quiet for a moment before asking, "Do you love her, Daddy? Like how you used to love Mommy?" Marcus felt his breath catch because he'd been trying not to examine that question too closely. But confronted by his daughter's directness, he had to face the truth. "I think I might, Emma, but it's complicated. Dr. Sylvia and I met when we were both struggling, when we both needed help, and I don't want her to feel obligated to return my feelings just because I helped her when she was down. That wouldn't be fair to her. Love should be freely chosen, not repayment for kindness." Emma looked at him with those wise 7-year-old eyes. "But Daddy, you always say that love isn't about keeping score. That real love is when people choose to be together because they make each other better, and Dr. Sylvia makes us better. She helps me learn, and she makes you smile, and we help her too. We gave her a place when she needed it, and we remind her she's important, so nobody owes anybody anything. It's just choosing to be together because it's good." Marcus was stunned by his daughter's wisdom, by her ability to articulate truths he'd been avoiding, and he realized that she was right. But the question wasn't whether he and Sylvia had begun their relationship in crisis, but whether they'd built something real, something that could endure beyond those crisis circumstances. He decided to be honest with Sylvia before she moved out, to express his feelings and let her respond without pressure, to give her the choice his daughter had identified as essential to real love. So on her last evening in the apartment, after Emma was asleep, Marcus asked Sylvia to sit with him and said, "Before you move into your new place, I need to tell you something, and I want you to know that there's no pressure attached to this, that nothing changes our friendship or your relationship with Emma, regardless of how you respond. But I would regret not being honest with you." Sylvia's expression was carefully neutral, waiting, and Marcus continued, "These past 3 months have meant more to me than I can adequately express. You came into our lives when we both needed something we didn't know we needed. Yes, I helped you materially when you were struggling, but you've helped me emotionally. You've reminded me that I'm capable of more than just surviving, that I can be a good father and a good man, that my struggles don't define my worth. And somewhere in all of that, I fell in love with you. Not because you needed help and I played hero, but because of who you are. Your resilience, your intelligence, your kindness to Emma, the way you maintained dignity, even when circumstances tried to strip it away. And I needed to tell you that before you leave, not to obligate you to return my feelings, but because you deserve to know that you are valued, you are loved, and whatever you choose to do with that information, it doesn't change the fact that helping you has been one of the best things I've done, because it brought you into our lives. Sylvia was crying before he finished, tears streaming down her face, and when she spoke her voice was thick with emotion. Marcus, I love you too. I've loved you since that first birthday dinner, when you and Emma chose kindness over convenience, when you saw my hunger and my shame and responded not with judgment, but with invitation. I've loved you through these months of living here, of being part of your family, of feeling valued and needed, after months of feeling worthless and discarded. But I've been terrified to say anything, because I didn't want you to think I was using you, that my feelings were just gratitude or dependency, and I needed to get this job, needed to stand on my own feet financially, before I could be certain that what I felt was real love, and not just fear of being alone again. She took his hands in hers. But it is real, Marcus. What I feel is real love, the kind that sees your struggles and your strengths, that appreciates how hard you work for Emma, that admires your character and your choices, that wants to build a life together not because either of us needs rescuing but because we're better together than apart. And I want to be clear about something. I'm not staying out of obligation. I'm choosing to stay because you and Emma have become my family. Because I wake up happy knowing I'll see you both. Because when I imagine my future, you're both in it, not as a debt to repay, but as the people I most want to share my life with. Marcus felt something in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the warm hope of possibility, of a future that included partnership and love and the building of something good together. And he kissed her with all the emotion he'd been holding back for months. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying and laughing. And Emma's voice came from the hallway. Does this mean Dr. Sylvia is staying? Because I'm really happy if she is. But I'm also supposed to be asleep, so can you not tell on me for eavesdropping? They both laughed and called Emma out for a group hug. This makeshift family that had formed through crisis and kindness, through mutual aid and genuine affection. And Marcus realized that the best things in his life had come from moments when he chose compassion over convenience, when he helped someone despite limited resources, when he trusted that kindness was never wasted even when you couldn't afford it. Sylvia did move into her own apartment initially, wanting to establish her independence and financial stability before fully committing to a romantic relationship, but she spent most evenings and weekends with Marcus and Emma, gradually transitioning from tutor and friend to partner and co-parent. And 6 months later, when Marcus proposed with a simple ring he'd saved for over months, she said yes without hesitation, and Emma served as their flower girl at a small wedding ceremony that celebrated not just their love, but the journey that had brought them together, the struggles that had tested them, the kindness that had connected them. Years later, when people would ask how they'd met, Sylvia would tell the story of showing up hungry at a restaurant, of a single father and his daughter inviting a stranger to share their birthday meal, of kindness offered when resources were limited, and she'd say that Marcus and Emma had saved her life that day, had given her more than food. They'd given her dignity, purpose, and eventually family. But Marcus would always correct her gently, would say that she'd saved them too, that helping her had reminded him of his own capacity for generosity, had taught Emma that kindness mattered more than abundance, that you didn't need much to make a difference in someone's life, just the willingness to share what you had and to see others' humanity. And that lesson, learned at a modest family restaurant on a little girl's 7th birthday, had become the foundation of their family's values, the principle they tried to live by and pass forward. Emma, growing up in a household where helping others was modeled daily, where her parents' love story began with an act of compassion, developed a deep commitment to service, and eventually became a social worker herself, dedicating her career to helping families in crisis, to connecting struggling people with resources, to creating the kind of networks of mutual aid that had saved her own family. And when people would ask what inspired her career choice, she'd talk about her 7th birthday, about watching her father invite a hungry stranger to share their meal, about the woman who'd become her mother, teaching her that circumstances didn't determine worth, that everyone deserved dignity and support, that sometimes the biggest transformations began with the smallest acts of kindness. Marcus and Sylvia built a life together based on the values that had brought them together: generosity, despite scarcity; kindness, without expectation of return; seeing others' humanity even when it was easier to look away. And they made a habit of inviting struggling people into their lives, not as charity cases, but as potential friends and family, offering meals and opportunities, and genuine connection. And their home became known as a place where people could find help without shame, where resources were shared freely, where everyone was valued, regardless of circumstances. And that reputation brought them deep friendships and a rich community, proved that choosing generosity over hoarding, compassion over judgment, created abundance that couldn't be measured in dollars but was infinitely more valuable. On Emma's 21st birthday, at a dinner that had become an annual tradition, she raised a glass and said, "14 years ago, on my 7th birthday, my dad made a choice that changed all our lives. He saw someone in need and chose to help, even though helping meant sacrificing something he'd planned to give me. He taught me that day that love means choosing others' needs sometimes. That kindness isn't about grand gestures but about small choices to share what we have. And Mom, when you accepted that invitation, when you let strangers help you, despite your pride, you taught me that receiving help with grace is as important as giving it. That we're all going to need support sometimes, and there's no shame in accepting kindness. You both taught me that we're all connected, that helping others is helping ourselves, that the barriers we build between people are artificial and harmful, and that choosing to break down those barriers, to see everyone as deserving of dignity and care, that's how we build the world we want to live in. So thank you both for being my parents, for showing me what love looks like in action, and for teaching me that the best way to celebrate anything is to share it with others, especially those who need celebration most." Marcus and Sylvia held hands across the table, looking at the daughter they'd raised together, the young woman who'd taken the lessons of a 7-year-old's birthday dinner and built a life of service around them. And they knew that the ripples from that single act of kindness had spread farther than they'd ever imagined, had touched not just their own family but every person Emma would go on to help, every family she'd support, every child she'd advocate for. And that legacy, that ongoing multiplication of compassion, was worth more than any amount of money or success, was the true measure of a life well lived. And they were grateful, endlessly grateful, that Marcus had listened to his daughter that day, had seen a hungry woman and chosen to help, had started a chain reaction of kindness that would echo forward through generations. Because that's what love does. That's what choosing each other despite and because of our struggles does. It creates something larger than ourselves, something that outlasts our individual lives, something that reminds everyone it touches that we're all worthy of dignity, we're all deserving of help, we're all connected in ways that transcend our surface differences. And the simple act of sharing a meal, of seeing someone's hunger and responding with generosity, of choosing compassion when convenience would be easier, that simple act could change everything, could transform lives, could build families, could teach children lessons they'd carry forward forever, could create ripples of kindness that would spread outward infinitely. And that was the real miracle, not that one man helped one woman, but that choosing to help, choosing to see each other, choosing to share what little we have with those who have less, choosing love over fear, generosity over scarcity, connection over isolation. That was how we changed the world, one meal at a time, one invitation at a time, one choice to be kind at a time, until those individual choices accumulated into a movement, a culture, a better way of being human together.